Hey there, we've got something totally new for you this week. Totally new for me, in fact. A live version of the show, recorded at Reuters NEXT, our big live journalism event in New York. I'm talking to Sally Buzbee, Reuters North American editor, and Howard Schneider, our Federal Reserve correspondent. We're looking at how the Trump presidency is reshaping economics and politics, and who the winners and losers are. So stay tuned for a lively one. I'm Carmel Crimmins, and this is Reuters Econ World. Every week we go deep on the economic principles and ideas driving the biggest news around the world. On this week's show, Navigating Trump's World, live from New York.
It is my absolute pleasure to introduce my colleague, the nicest woman at Reuters, Carmel Crimmins, who is also the host of Reuters Econ World. This is a special moment in Reuters history because we have our first ever live podcast recording. Now, what that means is anything could go wrong. And we hope it does for the numbers of listeners that would attract. But it also means that all of you are involved. So I'd like to invite to the stage Carmel Crimmins, along with her fabulous guests. Here they are. Can we give them a big round of applause, please? Because you're all on air, as it were. No worries.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the first ever live podcast of Reuters Econ World, our first ever live show. I have been doing this pod for the best part of 2 years from a darkened room in Dublin. So I am loving the change of scene, and I'm loving the topic, Navigating Trump's World. It's got to be the topic that fixates every business leader, every political leader around the world. Luckily for you folks, I've got two people on stage with me who know more about this topic than most. We have Sally Buzbee, who is our US and Canada editor, and Howard Schneider, who's our Federal Reserve correspondent. That means he covers all the toing and froing at the Federal Reserve, and we're expecting quite a bit of toing and froing over the next few months, which we will get into shortly. Before we get into that, a word of warning to the wise. That's all, you guys. I'm going to require some audience participation. You see, every week on the show, we do a quiz. And I thought, why not throw out a few questions to the New York crowd? They're a savvy bunch, but you're going to need to make some noise. So I'm going to make you practice. And I'm sorry, I'm not saying the doors are locked. I'm not saying, you can't run, but I'm going to make you practice with me. So I'm going to ask a question, very simple question. Did you spend more or less this Black Friday versus last year, okay? So when I say, did you spend more, and you did spend more, you're going to shout more, okay? Then I'm going to ask, did you spend less? And if that is indeed the case, you're going to shout less. So I really need you to make some noise for all the people who are watching on the live stream, all the people who are going to be listening and watching to this podcast later. And also, I've got 2 teenage kids watching this live stream right now. And if this room stays silent, okay, my parental power base is going to shrink even further, and it's already minute. So please do me a favor. Okay, so here goes. This year, on Black Friday, did you spend more? More. Ooh, US consumers doing okay. Okay. Or did you spend less? Less. That's a very confused picture. That's quite on brand, isn't it, really, for we don't know which way the US economy is going. Okay, well, thank you. That was a great volume. We're going to have more quiz questions during the show. But first of all, let's get cracking on our podcast. First of all, Sally and Howard, did you spend more or less on Black Friday?
You got teenagers, I got grandkids, so it escalates.
Oh, it does?
Yeah.
Sally,
Beware of
less? Not enough bargain hunters for you?
I don't know why I spent less, but I spent less.
Okay, well, let's get into the US economy. Okay, so Howard,
Yep.
Trump obviously swept into power with plans to shake up the US economy, to shake up the global economy. Obviously, one of his signature policies was on trade. What has the actual impact been?
Yeah, shaken up, everything.
Right.
And I had to come on with a cheat sheet because so much is in motion. I mean, we know tariff rates are now averaging about 15%. That's way up from the 2-ish that he inherited, right? This is way beyond what he did in the first term. So the U.S., we know the U.S. is collecting money, $200 billion so far, $40 billion a month or something like that. We don't know if that's going to stick. We know prices are higher. Federal Reserve estimates maybe half a percentage point or so of the current inflation, 4/10 of the current inflation is due to tariffs. We don't know if that's going to be sticky or if it isn't going to be sticky.
Right.
Maybe it's going to fade away over time. Has manufacturing rebounded? Talk about a manufacturing recession. We lost 50,000 jobs in that sector. Is that due to tariffs? Is that due to slower growth, weaker demand? We're going to see next year the 2026 forecasts that are starting to roll out tend to be for pretty resilient demand, despite the bifurcated consumer.
Yes.
But an inflation risk as well. So this is restructuring a lot of relationships. Where it's all going to land in terms of reshoring, in terms of jobs, in terms of where prices settle out, I think is just going to take a long, long time to really sort through.
The other signature policy, of course, is on immigration, the immigration crackdown. What impact is that having on the labor market? What are we seeing?
So you see, kind of episodic reports of shortages in skilled trades,
Right.
Construction employment's down, maybe that's related. You can see this very clearly in the chart if you plot the civilian labor force. The foreign-born share of that peaked at almost 20% under Biden. It had been in the mid-15s, going back to the Obama years, and been scaling up, leveling out under Trump, and then scaling up. That's back down to 18%-ish or so, 1.5 million fewer foreign-born workers in the labor force today than when Trump took office. Are they gone? Are they gone underground? This is one of the things people are trying to determine, but they are officially a lot fewer of them. That does have implications for growth in a country that's aging, for sure. But there are fewer foreign-born workers today than there were a few months ago.
Sally, Howard obviously referenced inflation there, right? We are seeing the impact of the tariffs on prices. It's a big problem for Trump, isn't it?
I think it's a very large challenge for Trump, as it would be for any president, as it obviously was for Biden. I mean, some of these things are just inescapable. I think it's fair to say that Trump is really running into what is probably in his second term the first sort of significant challenges that he's faced. There's a combination of things. It's obviously the debate over affordability in the United States, the looming midterms. There's other issues like Epstein that have sort of put him off his game a bit for periods of time. We have a lot of indication that he is going to, really try to aggressively address the inflation or affordability issue. Yesterday, he talked about it. He said it wasn't, he said it was a Democratic con. He said that it was not true. It was a fabrication. But I think that he obviously faces, real voter perception. Right? And I think there are two things that we see. First of all, last week, they very much sort of internally had turmoil over what to do about the healthcare costs, about whether to extend these ACA healthcare subsidies. Essentially threw up a trial balloon. It was deeply unpopular with parts of the Republican base, and so they sort of pulled that back. But that issue still is out there. And then also we've seen recently where this sort of, dichotomy where they sort of are saying constantly, tariffs aren't causing inflation, but then they pulled back some very sort of discrete and specific tariffs on some food issues and food items and things like that,
bananas,
as a
coffee.
way to try to mitigate that. Right. We also know that Trump is really planning to, I think, aggressively go out and talk to the country and try to make the argument that the economy is going okay and that affordability is not an issue. Probably referencing the tax cuts and things next year.
Right. I mean, we're obviously talking about, sort of Trump's world, but it's also AI's world as well, isn't it? I mean, is it really is it really AI that's driving the economy at the moment, Howard, right? I mean, you see it in terms of obviously the stock market, which helps with consumer sentiment. You see it with business investment.
Right. Certainly aspects of it. I mean, there's been this tremendous run-up in capital investment, and business investment has been one of the main contributors to GDP growth this year. But the mystery, I mean, maybe it's a mystery, maybe it's not to all y'all, I don't know. But the consumption still rolls along.
Right.
Everybody's been expecting when are you going to see the consumer weaken, and the retail sales just continue to grow. Is there stress in certain parts of the income distribution? Sure, but modestly so. The last Fed report on financial instability said overall household balance sheets pretty healthy. You hear, narrow tales of, defaults on subprime car loans and things like that, but nothing systemic and nothing big. So sure, AI, but embedded, kind of resilience. Haven't seen anybody saying when AI disappears, the economy is going to disappear.
But isn't that like the K-shaped economy, right?
Sure.
One stat that I'm always drawn to is it's like the top 10% of Americans in terms of income. They account for nearly 50% of consumer spending, right?
Well, yes, and that's the question sort of the day is how weak that lower, branch of the K is, and, does it extend so far up that the whole thing topples over? I don't see many people calling for that round. The recession odds that I've seen people sort of hover around aren't really out of line with what is normally the case.
But I do think there are political implications of that, even if there aren't economic implications.
Right.
Because I think one of the things that is very important to remember is that when Trump won the presidency the second time, he went well beyond his base, right? I mean, he actually went well beyond his base, and he did attract what we might call, lower middle income voters and things like that. And a lot of the improvement in certain demographic groups in the United States was very much driven by people having, or at least telling, they said they explained their vote by, we trust Trump on the economy. And so I think there is some vulnerability, even if the vast majority of the economy sails along, as Howard is saying. I think that affordability issue, that is clearly why they're nervous about it. And I think that's an issue for Republicans going forward, once you have sort of the intrinsic trust among some people that Trump is good with the economy. For future Republicans, that is a bit of a challenge, I think, in some ways.
Right.
And you do have, just to close the AI question off,
the
labor market implications of that potentially.
Right.
Some people think you're starting to see the beginnings of that with the difficulty college graduates are having.
Kind of the AI layoff sort of.
All of that, does that start to really accelerate in the next year or two, or is this something that's still, long enough down the road that you can conceivably plan a transition of some sort to that world?
Yeah. Quiz time, guys. All right, I think we all remember where we were back in April when Trump announced his Liberation Day tariffs. And there were obviously some surprising announcements that day, one of which was a 10% tariff on a frozen island in the Antarctic, largely inhabited by penguins. Can any of you guys remember the name of those islands? Was it either the McDonald Islands or the Mackenzie Islands? Okay, so if you think it's McDonald, shout McDonald now. Was it McDonald?
McDonald.
Oh, was it Mackenzie?
Yeah.
Are you guys on ChatGPT? Are you? I mean, very well done. Right? This is a clever crowd. Okay. All right, well, let's leave aside the penguins. They did pretty good. They only got a 10% tariff. Other grouping that probably are doing pretty well right now, Sally, is the big business, right? I mean, they seem to know, or many of them seem to know how to navigate Trump's world, right? They make the big investments, they flatter, they put the donation down for the ballroom. But there is a risk with that, isn't there? Because we're also seeing a much more interventionist approach by Trump in terms of big business, right? We've seen the stake in Intel, the golden share. Right.
This is one of the most fascinating things of the Trump administration is just this, everything is Trump is really a deal maker. He's a deal maker when he's dealing with individual foreign countries. He's really dealing, this is an obvious thing to say, but he's also doing that with individual companies, right? And I think the volatility level for companies because of that is extremely high. We hear that a lot when you're talking to people. Obviously, they're trying to navigate, do we keep our heads down? Do we try to aggressively go in there and cut a deal? Will he notice us? Will he notice our industry? And Trump, obviously, I mean, one of the things about this administration is they have just taken on a lot. They are always constantly juggling 9 or 10 balls on any given week. And I think that there is a lot of, this week we're paying attention to chips. The next week we're paying attention to finance. The next week we're paying attention to agriculture. Then we pop back to this. And so I think even though a lot of companies have figured this out, I also think that there's a lot of people in the country who are like, we didn't have to worry about this as much in the past. And now we have to have sort of a strategy to either try to really be talking with the administration or keeping our heads down.
Right.
And just that uncertainty about when do we pop into the attention frame of this administration, you hear a lot about that just being something that people really have to pay attention
Right.
to.
It's kind of changed the nature of lobbying in DC.
Oh, it has incredibly changed the nature of lobbying in Washington. I mean, there's so many people who have, long-standing lobbying or industry-wide lobbying standards. And at the beginning of this year, you could just see them sort of trying to figure out, like, what do we do? How do we, I mean, obvious things like, do we have people, does anyone we know anyone in Trump's inner circle?
Right.
And who's making the
personal-
decisions
personal
in Trump's
connection.
inner circle
Yeah.
on this particular issue, right? But I think it's also been, a lot of it is much more Trump deals person to person. And so you might, your CEO might need to now be
Yeah.
your primary lobbyist, where maybe in the past that wasn't needed. I think the energy level of this administration is something, and that emanates directly from Trump, is something that is just extraordinary and somewhat historic, I would say, in some ways.
No, just I want to like. Can I ask a question?
Go for it, Howard.
Thing.
It's a live podcast. You can do whatever you want.
Okay, so there goes my mic. So EV tax credits, right? That's steering capital as well,
Yeah.
right? Okay, so is this different from that? And is the level of, I guess, energy being spent having to get at this guy, right? Distortive, a problem in the long run?
I mean, for companies or for like the country?
Yeah, both.
I mean, I think it is. It's a great question. I think there are a lot of people who like the idea that the president is hands-on and is really, really trying to solve problems. I mean, he is talking directly to, world leaders. He is trying to, and I think there's an attraction to that, to people. I think the downsides of that are that one of the reasons that we sort of have systems of, inside the government, there's an interagency process. The National Security Council brings all the best minds together, and they come up with 3 options for the president, and you can sort of assume that there's, the best ideas have risen. That process no longer exists in the U.S. government, right? And you can see that in a situation like Russia-Ukraine, where when Witkoff and Kushner are talking to Russia, the conversation is here. And when Rubio is talking to Russia, the conversation is here.
Right.
And I just think that the volatility between where the actual, where it lands is the risk in that is immense. Let's put it that way. And I think every individual company faces essentially that same sort of, how does the administration make decisions? How does the administration make decisions? How does the president of the United States make decisions? I think there is much more uncertainty about that now. Even if you think that Biden was not very well involved, you sort of knew who in his administration was probably making the decisions. And I just think the volatility factor with this administration is, I'm not saying it's unprecedented. I think it is quite unique in the last several decades in the country.
Right.
So some people like that hands-on approach. Does the Fed, Howard, certainly get hands-on there?
Yeah, I got to give a big no on that one. I think this has been, there have been times when the economics going on inside the Fed have been, more interesting. Certainly the COVID program, standing up things at a moment's notice to fix the crisis, or back during the, the Bernanke years. But in terms of the sort of politics, the institutional threat, what's going to happen, down to the point of, is the White House going to make a play to start firing Reserve Bank presidents? No sign of that yet, but certainly within the kind of possibility. So in terms of the politics and the institutional issues like that, yeah, pretty interesting.
It's like Succession with Excel spreadsheets, right?
Well, and not, and there aren't as many potential successors, but thank
But
goodness.
let's talk about the successors, because obviously Kevin Hassett is considered to be the guy.
Right.
Maybe we'll get an announcement on it, I don't know, in the new year. If he is the guy, what does that mean for rates? What does that mean for markets?
Sure. The working assumption is that the Trump chair will bias, the curve lower, right?
Right.
The question is how far and how fast. And got to keep in mind, this is 12 people voting,
Right.
19 people sitting around the table. You have to get a consensus. There may be some leeway. There may be some grace given to a new chair to make those first couple of rate calls. But at some point, if the policy gets too far out of line with economy, inflation, prices, et cetera, there's going to be a market reaction. And as we all know, when things start to react, they can escalate and move really quickly. So I think you still have, there's been no sign of market discipline yet around this decision, but I think the world seems to be saying, let's wait, if there's a policy mistake, that's when the reaction comes. So I think there are limits.
So what you're saying effectively is the markets will put manners on you when you're in the Fed, right? It keeps you.
The Fed chair does not have carte blanche to go in and declare the zero lower bound when there isn't a crisis.
But we are staring into the prospect of a divided Fed, though, right? Which we haven't had in a long time. I mean, that's going to create volatility, right?
That's volatile. That's the discipline itself. There is nothing to say that the 5 Reserve Bank presidents, including the vice chair, who is the president of the New York Fed, can't say, you know what, this is the wrong. It's happened before. It happened under Volcker. A group of them pushed back and, basically overturned the chair's wishes in a meeting. We'll see where that heads. And you've got 3 Biden appointees on there right now who will remain, presumably, depending on the outcome of Lisa Cook's case in the Supreme Court. But legal minds seem to think that's more likely going to break in her direction than not. So are they going to go along with, overly aggressive cutting program? I don't think so.
What's your take on, though? Do you think if it is Kevin Hassett, will Jay Powell leave? Will he? There is a question mark over that, whether he might actually stay on as a governor.
Sure. He has his option, just to be clear. His term as chair expires in May. He has another year or so left on his term as governor, so he could stay around. Only one other person did this, Mariner Eccles, back in the day. Would he stay on? Listen, he's an institutionalist. He's, one of sort of last man standing in terms of the old Washington, right? The way it used to work. He's a bipartisan figure. He's been appointed by both Democrats and Republicans. So I don't think he's going to walk out the door if he thinks there's a real serious threat to the institution.
Right.
What would that look like? That would look like him being skeptical that there would not be an effort to start firing Reserve Bank presidents if his seat was filled with somebody else. That would be skepticism over how internal communications, internal staffing levels, the research freedoms of that the reserve banks now enjoy, the budgets that the reserve banks now have set centrally. If he thought they were going to get starved out of their ability to, conduct the research they felt they needed to, I could fully see him sticking around if he wasn't assured that the institution, as he knows it today, was going to, sustain itself.
That's a signal for us all to watch out for then.
Sure.
Beginning next year.
Yeah.
Okay, quick quiz time. We're making it rapidly through. So, back in August, a US tech boss gifted Trump a plaque with a 24-karat gold base. Do you know who it was? Was it Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook, or was it Tim Cook of Apple? Okay, so I'm going to roar out Mark Zuckerberg's name. Was it Mark Zuckerberg? Was it Tim Cook?
Tim Cook.
You guys read the news. This is super impressive.
Follow the news.
Thank you. All right, we're in the final part of our show. Let's scoot back to the global economy. So, in theory, Howard, right, America's trading partners were meant to be big losers from this trade war. And obviously China was a big driving force, I think, of what President Trump was doing. Here we are now in December. Who's winning in that US-China tensions? Can we say, or is it just too early? I mean, I know we're kind of in year zero of this.
I know it feels like we're just seriously in year zero, because here's what I wonder. I wonder if we're going to look back 20 years from now and really see this as the moment when, the U.S. kind of lost the plot in a sense of innovation, science, research. I had friends over for dinner on Thanksgiving, an Indian couple. They're research physicians. We came here, they say, because this was the place in the world where you could follow the evidence and conduct your line of research and see where it ended and hopefully end up and, contribute to knowledge, to human knowledge. They don't feel that's happening, to the same degree, or that it's at risk, right? So down the road, maybe AI tools become, with protein folding and all the things that can do, that becomes the engine of productivity, and we don't need doctors, people from all the world to come and do their research here anymore. I don't know. But you do wonder if we haven't hit kind of a turning point, if this continues on the current path where just sort of raw inquisitiveness and knowledge is as valued as it has been.
What's your take on that, Sally?
I think that there is a short-term, a medium-term, and a long-term question of the impact of the Trump administration. And I do think that I agree with Howard that some of the, pullbacks on research, some of the issues in terms of rule of law, executive power, those things have potential to impact the country, obviously, for years and years to come. And I think that that is not also protectionism, trade, obviously, is a massive thing. You hear a lot of people, specifically in Europe, but also I think all across the globe, private companies and also other sorts of people saying we're sitting here and just watching to see what will happen, right? And many private companies obviously are sort of hedging their bets. They're certainly not leaving the U.S. market because it remains incredibly the most,
World's biggest economy still is.
And growth, but they are hedging a little bit, right? And so I think the question for the U.S. is whether this enormous sort of, breaking of precedent, breaking of norms, which is across we could talk about, 9 different areas where that has happened, whether that has any unintended long-term consequences. I think it's also a question of whether it lasts. The volatility in U.S. politics is real. That is one of the things to just kind of keep in mind. Right now, the Democrats are obviously, very much at a low point in their fortunes, but that doesn't mean that there isn't this continual swing back and forth between, between the politics of this country. And so I think long-term uncertainty, I think, is quite high, in my view, right now in the United States.
As we head into, and this is a question for both of you, maybe and the final question, as we head into 2026, what are the key things that you were looking out for to sort of signpost how this evolves?
Yeah, I think there's a couple. There's obviously, Howard referenced the Supreme Court ruling on, Lisa Cook and the Fed. I think that's a critically important one. There's the tariffs ruling, which could potentially still happen this year into next year. Epstein and what happens with that, whether it continues to be an issue, maybe not as big of a deal, but still has some real staying power to it. What happens to the economy, how the Democrats react to that, how Trump reacts to that, whether he is defensive or whether he actually, goes out and talks to the country about affordability, the midterms. I'm sure I'm forgetting things.
Yeah, no, I would say, look, this is going to sound very old-fashioned and very simplistic, but I would say, the unemployment rate.
Absolutely.
Right.
Keep an eye on that, and particularly some of the spreads within the unemployment rate. The black unemployment went from 6% a few months ago to 7.5 now, and it seems to be staying up there. That's often an indicator, sort of a precursor to other problems in the labor market. So are we going to see a demand-driven rise in fading demand finally from the consumer and a rise in unemployment about that? Are you going to see larger job displacement or much slower hiring as a result of AI investments, et cetera? 4.4, not so bad historically.
Right.
When you start edging towards 5 and above, that usually causes, starts to be a problem for whoever's in office. So
I would say just one other thing, which is the president right now is spending an enormous amount of time on actually foreign entanglements, right? And his base wants him to pay attention to the United States of America. And I think that balance is really, really interesting for the future of his presidency. I think, and it's been surprising to me, this is one of the things that has really surprised me about this administration, is how much time he has spent on, we know he wants to end wars, and that's obviously
really wants the Nobel Peace Prize. You got to work for it.
But I do think that the aggressiveness toward Latin America has taken a lot of people by surprise. And, presidents, one of the big risks for presidencies is whether they become distracted from the core things that they need to do. And I think that is one of the risks for this presidency. I think he has a lot of people urging him not to become distracted.
Right.
And so there might be some course correction there, but I think him becoming distracted is a potential risk that I would just watch for next year.
Sally, Howard, thank you so much. Audience, thank you so much. You have been wonderful. Let's take the show on the road. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, you can move. Thank you very much.
A big thank you to Sally and Howard for all the insights and the laughs on stage. Thank you to Kim Vanell, the host of our sister podcast, Reuters World News, for emceeing us in New York. And to Josh Summer, Ethan Plotkin, and the entire team at Reuters Next for making it all sound and look so good. This is Reuters Econ World. Every week we go deep on the economic principles and ideas driving the biggest news around the world. If you want to tell us what you thought of this week's show, please drop us a line in the comment section of your favourite podcast platform. Our executive producer is Leila de Kretzer. Remember, for all your daily news, just ask your smart speaker for Reuters World News 7 days a week. It's available across all podcast platforms. And if you'd like to see the faces behind the voices, watch it on Spotify. I'll be back next week, minus the stage and the live audience.